If every single person who has liked you in your lifetime were to light up on a map, it would create the most glitteringly beautiful network you could imagine. Throw in the strangers you've been kind to, the people you've made laugh or inspired along the way, and that star-bright network of you would be an impressive sight to behold. You're so much more than you think you are. You have done so much more than you realize. You're trailing a bright pathway that you don't even know about. What a thing. What a thing indeed.
My name is Jennifer, and I am excited and intrigued about sharing my spiritual journey and also nervous. I grew up with my mom and dad, and I have one sister who's 2 years younger than me. We lived, my dad had an executive training job, so we moved every 2 years, and we settled in Indiana when I was in third grade. And I lived on my grandpa's farm. He raised pigs, and that was really cool because a good experience because we had a huge farmland to chase lightning bugs and Janine and I would play in the cornfields like a giant maze when we were small, and I rode my bike all over the country roads for hours after school. We lived in Laketon, Indiana, near North Manchester, which you might know because of Manchester College, which is now Manchester University. A lot of people don't know where that is because it's a really small rural town. So it's, I tell people it's about 45 minutes away from Fort Wayne. And and if that doesn't help, it's between Warsaw and Wabash. I have one sister. Her name is Janine, and she's 2 years younger than me. And we were always mistaken for twins, and she hates that. And I was very dominant as a child, so I got to direct all the games. I was one of her bosses, and now she towers over me by several inches. And never pick on a younger sister because you'll never know how tall she gets. I love being outside. It was a time when I could go outside. I didn't have to come home until dark. And I loved riding my bike because it was a freedom and I was in control. And I found the sound of riding my bike really almost meditative, very calming. And I chose, well, I was a kid, so I couldn't ride on the freeway, but I chose the country roads. I'd go from my house to my grandfather's house to see him and my great grandmother. My mom and dad went weekly to a church. So anytime we moved to a new place, they would kind of go to different churches in the community. And we ended up my mom was always looking for a more progressive church because she grew up in a fire and brimstone church. And we ended up in a small denomination, but it was a large and progressive church for North Manchester and called Church of the Brethren. Church of the Brethren came from a background of being Protestant, where you were encouraged to ask questions and to be educated. So you made the decision individually when it was time to be baptized, or when you joined the church officially as an adult instead of an infant. And it's historically connected to several universities. It's historically connected to several colleges, and like Laverne and Manchester University in North Manchester and several other ones. So the denomination as a whole right now is very conservative because it's a very small denomination. And I was lucky to grow up in a church that was very active and dynamic with really large youth, elementary, middle school youth programming. Church of the Brethren in North Manchester was very strongly connected to the college. So, for example, my mom was a professor at the college, and a lot of the leaders in the church were also college professors or worked at the college in administrative roles. And this was a time where people naturally lived in the town as well as worked in the college. So everybody was local and participated together in the community. And you knew other professors' kids. You knew that was my peer group. And we went to activities at the church and at the college, whether they be music performances or movies, or there was a curriculum for the elementary school. So it depended on the volunteer adults. And sometimes I learned about Bible stories. And I remember learning about the farmer who was, taking his wagon, and he was very humble. And that's connected in my mind to how you can't take all your earthly possessions through the needle. so it's very the church emphasized, as well as education, they also emphasized simplicity and being a peace church, similar to Quakerism, in that people were encouraged to be, it was accepted to be a conscientious objector. I remember that being a big thing with my youth group as the boys got closer and closer to being age 18 and needing to sign in, and being worried about if that would affect their college loans, or the choice between being between honoring their spiritual religious beliefs of the church denomination and needing to participate in society and going to college. Yeah, my mom was an elementary school teacher and then became a professor. And we knew a lot of the parents group that she and dad circulated with were also professors. And I always knew that I was going to go to college no matter what. And I always learned from my mother that it was important to have a career, like an academic career. And we had, like, my dad was really proud they got an encyclopedia set for Janine and I. And there was always magazines in the house, and dad always read all the newspapers and watched all the news shows. Mom took us to the library once a week as kids, every week. And she read to us from, the time we were born to school age. And we had books in the house. I started reading Susan Cooper, The Dark is Rising series, which was a science fiction. Which was fantasy. And Janine and I both had really good, I think we both have really active imaginations. One of the things when I was growing up from very young was I really enjoyed being in my backyard. We had a group of kids in one place I grew up where we snuck under a farmer's fence and went to the local pond. And I was in first or second grade and younger when I started bringing things back from ponds and puddles. And I had all sorts of containers and small aquariums in the garage, and had tadpoles and mayfly larvae and all just sorts of things, guppies or minnows from the pond. And I remember coming home from a vacation once, and the whole garage was filled with frogs because the tadpoles had grown. And my mom and dad were very tolerant of that. So I knew that I was my main interest was nature and animals, and that led me to thinking about becoming a wildlife researcher. I ended up choosing to go to Earlham College because I was encouraged to go in state because of costs. And it was also, I felt similar to the denomination I grew up in being a peace church. It appealed to me in having grown up in a religious community like Church of the Brethren, that I would be in a college where about 11% were Quakers, that fellow Quakers, and that I was continuing being part of something that reminded me of my childhood church. While I was at Earlham College, I studied, I was in their general biology program, and I really, as I got more advanced classes, I loved ornithology, I loved botany classes, and I did not like chemistry, and I went away from things like cell biology or being in the lab. So Earlham was really, really a good spot to go because I ended up going to visiting Costa Rica with a biology field trip during a vacation, and I got to go on a long-term hiking trip where we went to Dollywood. That was one of our, besides being in the forest, that was very unique. And there was a lot of, Earlham had a student-led riding program, equestrian program, and I took, if I could, I took riding lessons each term. And I loved going on trail rides. I was really encouraged to go to Manchester College because that's where my mom worked, and we would have had tuition deferred for me. And Janine did end up going to Manchester College and also becoming an elementary school teacher, and now she's a professor of education. I went more the route where, from going as an elementary school kid and hanging out with mom while she taught classes and, playing with Janine and hiding, behind the campus trees and running in and out of the hallways of the buildings and waiting on mom while she graded papers, to feeling like I wanted to go someplace else that I could grow more at. And to me, Earlham was a whole new world of being more liberal and progressive. And they had a food co-op that was student run. Like I said, the equestrian program was student run. They had an extremely good biology department where the professors had all sorts of field trips. And originally I wanted to be a marine biologist for a while, and they did have a marine biology program, or rather a trip. And they did have a marine biology class. My youth group was really encouraged to explore other religions in our surrounding area. They took us to Fort Wayne, which seemed really big, to go to an African American church and participate in that service. So we were the one row of white people in the back, and everybody was really friendly to us. And we went to another Christian denomination where their Easter Sunday was at the door. They handed out a series of stapled pages which detailed every single injury that Jesus experienced during that time before he was crucified. And that was horrifying. So, but it was a very, very good youth program. We went to DC and talked to some official type people about nuclear weapons and wanting to decrease the potential nuclear war. We were learning about other denominations We had classes about our own religious denomination. I went to Church of the Brethren Bible Camp every summer. As a family, we went to church no matter what, every single Sunday. And they had a really good music program. I was in the youth choir. I was in the youth bell program, and I loved sneaking out after choir into the sanctuary, and I'd lay on a pew, and they had a real pipe organ, and the organist would be practicing for Sunday, and you could just feel the vibrations through the pew out from the organ, and I just loved that experience of appreciating that music. Part of the things I enjoyed about college is a world religion class, and I got into yoga and meditation. After college, I was still pretty much thinking of the route of going either into animal wildlife research, because I'd heard so many stories about the time when my mom and dad raised before kids lived in California. I wanted to go to California. So I also applied to some outdoor education programs in California. And the very first job I was accepted to after college was a outdoor science school job in San Joaquin in Northern California, near Half Moon Bay. And that's where I ended up. San Joaquin was basically an internship program. And you would work a year. Usually folks stayed in the program for 1 year as a naturalist, and there was an option to come back for 2 more years. And I ended up being one of the first folks that chose to stay all 3 years. I was in love with Northern California. It was so beautiful. I got to go to the ocean with a group of 5th and 6th graders every week. We looked at tide pools. There were sea lions. We got to hang out on a sand beach, a pebble beach. We went to a saltwater marsh. It was just a absolutely wonderful, eye-opening experience of what was available in the natural world. And we had a van that carried hot tomato soup with a grill, and we grilled up hot cheese sandwiches for all the kids. So it was just an amazing experience. It was the first time a lot of the kids saw redwood trees. Oftentimes the kids were from the Central Valley, and they might have been from a inner city area and maybe had never left their neighborhoods. And we had kids freaking out about being in the bunk beds because there were windows in those cabins, and they were afraid, at home they had to sleep in the bathtubs to avoid stray bullets. So they were ecstatic to be out in nature. And this was a time when my strongest spiritual journey was experiencing nature. On the weekends, I would continue to walk through the trails in the redwoods, and I would find a place to sit and just look at the views through the mountains and read a book, have a candy bar, just lie on the ground. And I remember one time going out in the rain and just listening and watching the raindrops go from leaf to leaf, and then falling on my rain jacket. It was so relaxing and powerful. I was in California for at least 13 years. I moved down to Southern California and worked in LA County, Los Angeles County Outdoor Science School. And it was the first place I could live in my own rental house without roommates. And that's when I began having my own cats. So I saw a lot of acceptance with my cats and having my own pets. And there was a lot of patience that I learned because they were indoor outdoor cats. and I trusted them to come back, even though there were coyotes in the neighborhood. And it was just wonderful also because I could look down from the little mountain village I lived in down to the valley. And we lived through a huge wildfire coming up from the valley up over the mountain. And luckily the flames, because of the way the fire works, they go up, it goes up, and it didn't come down to the town. But they had a helicopter fly in for the town meeting, and they had every street had like a fire truck, and we were on a moment's notice to be evacuated. It was really cool because we lived on the San Andreas Fault, right through the middle of the valley. It was the San Andreas Fault. And you could see on one side of the valley was the San Andreas Fault moves across from each other, that part, and then moved across. So there was two entirely different rock formations. So the other side was gray schist. Sorry. The other side was brown, nice rock, and our side was gray schist. We like to say that with the kids, gray schist. For some reason.
Say that 3 times fast.
Gracious. Well, I was in California. I besides the natural aspects where I just adored being outside and by myself in the redwoods or on the beach, I got connected in Wrightwood to a very small group that did Tai Chi every Saturday morning. And they also had a very small group. The same woman that led the Tai Chi had a small group that gathered for meditation, chanting time, singing time in honor of Satya Sai Baba. And I wasn't a devotee, but I found the group very powerful in terms of chanting and singing together. And another woman in the group, Debbie, was learning from a Hindu monk how to lead ceremonies. And she would lead puja ceremonies for us. And we'd be in the Joshua Tree Desert, a little bit lower than the yellow pine forest that I lived in. And it was very powerful because we would do chants with her. And sometimes during those services, I would actually feel the chants, like rearranging. This is going to sound really weird, but the vibrations and the chanting felt like it was rearranging my brain. And those types of experiences that I participated in, because I also went into some workshops led by a different monk. And those meditation experiences and chanting experiences probably was the most powerful religious experience that I've ever experienced in my entire life. As time went by, I began noticing I was getting migraines. I was becoming allergic to the pollen being dropped by the pine trees as I did my job. And I had some really weird situations where I found out later I was having moments of absence where I'd freeze and stop talking in the middle of my sentence. And then I'd start talking just where I left off. And my coworkers were starting to notice, but I didn't notice. So I just told them there wasn't anything going on. Then I had a major car accident where my car was totaled, but I didn't remember the time before that. And my friend picked me up from the accident site, and she took pictures of how my car had completely gone off the small mountain road, off a curve, into the chaparral, landed twice, once on the front, once on the back of the car. So I was smushed into a little square of the body of the car. And all the windows were broken, the tires were broken. The vehicle had gone through and snapped off 4-inch wide branches of chaparral bushes. I walked unharmed from the accident. Luckily, someone saw me and walked me back to the road. The ambulance came out and checked me out, and then they declared me physically, I could walk, and there was no sign of a concussion. A friend came out, and she was a photographer, so she took pictures before she took me to the hospital. And she took pictures of the indentations of my car that made into the ground as it bounced off the ground, and then of the car in a little puddle glass and torn metal with the windshield wipers going. She showed him to the doctor at the emergency room, and at first he was really impressed with this accident that I had been in, and he finally realized it was the same day and that I'd walked away from it. So he went ahead and ordered an MRI because I told him about the moments of absence that my coworkers were noticing and how I was having migraines. And I remember after the MRI walking in my neurologist's office, and she was the only one there besides the receptionist waiting for me. And I walked in, and she said across the room, "I can't believe you're walking and speaking normally." So I had a benign meningioma that required brain surgery to remove 6.5 centimeters by 5.5 centimeters. And I was told it grew very slowly, and it was the only reason I was able to function normally. It was large enough it should have paralyzed me or made me unable to speak. After that, I felt so blessed that it was benign, that it was an encapsulated circular tumor, so there weren't any encroaching cancerous roots into my brain. Very easy to remove. I felt like it was, I walked away from a car accident unharmed, and it seemed very much like the universe had a very deep plan for me that I could survive this. And I did feel that with the experiences I'd had participating in fire pujas and chanting and learning from some monks, that it was very much the universe was speaking through me. After a year after that situation, I hadn't found a job yet. And I decided, because I was transformed, to move back to North Manchester, where I'd earn more money for my salary in terms of being in a state that wasn't as expensive. And I would be able to see my father as he was becoming ill. And it was a terminal illness. And I wanted to be near my parents. And so I ended up back in Indiana.
This was like in your late 30s, something like that?
I was 38 when I had brain surgery. After the surgery, I couldn't control my right arm or my right leg. I still have patches of numbness to this day in the core of my right arm. I have moderate neglect in my right arm. I forget about it. And then I have patches of numbness through my right torso and in my lower right leg. And if I'm tired or hungry or don't take care of myself in some way, the inner core of my right foot goes completely numb. So it's like a weather vane. I was completely convinced I wanted to be a child psychologist and wanted to go to grad school and get a PhD. I was also, after my father died, I kind of was over my honeymoon period, and I got very deeply depressed. And my mom found a fellowship program that would lead to paying for me to get a master's in education. And I thought that fit really well with working in an outdoor education, because classroom teachers had praised my ability to teach the kids. And I thought going into classroom teaching would be really easy. So the program would also get me I earned a middle school, high school science teaching license. And my first job was at Medora. Medora had a elementary through 12th grade school, all in one building. So I thought it was very unique and would fit my quirkiness. And that's how I ended up in Seymour. I lived in Seymour, and I chose Seymour over some other small towns nearby because I knew there was a Universal Unitarian congregation nearby. Earlier, when I first came back to Indiana, my mom and I had gone to Fort Wayne to their UU meeting house, as well as I was going to Church of the Brethren, and as an adult. So I was very intrigued, and it fit UUism. UUism fit some of my experiences in meditating in terms of Bodhi Ling at UUCCI. And it also fit in terms of accepting folks that were Hindu. And I also felt like I wasn't in a traditional service. And it had become really hard in Church of the Brethren as an adult to sit and sing songs about Jesus and being a warrior for Christ. And UU fit much better. So I got involved with the youth here and the younger kids as well, mostly through helping Susan, because there was always need, the UUCCI and other churches always need, other congregations always need more volunteers for kids. Found through Susan the OWL program, and I never heard of Our Whole Lives or any type of knowledge-based, comprehensive sexuality education program for youth. So I was able to be trained thanks to UCCI that paid for my training, and I joined Sunny and Susan and David and some other leaders slowly as a fill-in. And now Sunny and David and myself are volunteering to lead OWL. And I just really appreciate how middle schoolers approach the world with freshness. I love that age because in many ways they're still kids and have a joy in the world and have a deep level of questioning as well as middle schoolers as they're forming their more permanent adult selves. And they're also just really, really funny. And yeah, so I feel that's a service. I feel it's very important, especially in the United States at these times, to have very comprehensive education for youth and in human sexuality, because that's something I lacked. And now programming in middle schools and high schools is even less present, because at least I had one semester in high school of sex ed, where the gym teacher talked about things. So over the years, I got more involved through being in the choir and through chalice circles. And I became more interested in how does the congregation actually work. And Chris Kevitt was talking about Sunday services team, and I expressed interest in what that meant, what you guys did. And she told me about the Sunday service team, and then she was like, Jennifer, we always need new people. Are you interested? And I said, well, maybe. And then a couple of months later, she asked again, and I said yes. And suddenly I was showing up for a Sunday services team meeting. And I kind of thought I was like interviewing for the position still. And lo and behold, I was on the team. And I really enjoyed being on Sunday Services team because I'm learning all the time. It's really interesting being in a smaller congregation because the folks that are active in the congregation have many positions that they filled. And I enjoy learning from people that have been on the board or been on the grounds teams. And I'm learning so much more about what it actually means to have a spiritual experience for congregants. I've always been interested in from Dennis to Mary to you, Nick. I've always been really interested in this community of Columbus and how it's a very much a small conservative town. At the same time, especially because of Cummins, there's a international feel, and it's been very intriguing and energizing to see how the Interfaith Campus has been formed and grown, and seeing the temple being built from a field. And I am just very energized and hopeful for the future. And part of that is learning more on the Sunday Services team of what the future holds and all the endless possibilities. And I really enjoyed the interfaith meals, the interfaith dinners we were doing. I really enjoyed going to attend a service at the mosque and then having dinner with the women. Initially, I participated off and on in UUCCI. I was very, very shy. And I was in Seymour where Anita Naines lived, and sometimes we carpooled together. So she got me interested in a lot of the small groups like the choir. And also Susan Burton was the children's RE at that point, and she introduced me to Bodie Ling and the children's program. I started working with Peace Camp. And then I came to service more often. I signed the book the same year as Marion signed the book, because I no longer remember what year that was. And I got more and more interested in coming to services. I was in the library committee when that was more than one person, and we were active. Besides choir and Bodie Ling, and then the meditation group with Frank, I also started going to chalice circles. And what I was finding out, partly because this is a smaller congregation, that this is a community for me that I feel safe in. And I remember one of the congregants, Edry, came up to me a couple of years ago. I've lived in Columbus now for 13 years, 12 years, 13 years. And I had been coming to UUCCI before that off and on for 3 years. And Edry said to me, when you first started coming to services, you would just hang out in the sides of the room and you wouldn't talk and you were like curled up upon yourself, so timid. And now you have just blossomed into someone who's participating in so many ways. And it's really nice to see your personality. And that was really interesting coming from someone else, because those are things I wasn't noticing. So I now feel a real sense of community and safety in UUCCI. Some ways I feel like my spiritual journey has come full circle in terms of me being outdoors as a kid, enjoying riding my bike in the fields, cornfields of Indiana, to being on these lovely grounds of the Interfaith Campus and exploring with the kids, having been a teacher, being able to explore with the kids in Peace Camp, often outside, to feeling safe enough to express my personality with a group of people. Whereas originally, when I chose my career path in high school, I thought I hated people. So now I'm very lucky to be a member of a living, breathing, growing, dynamic congregation.